Hey YouTube, Kevin Cleary here with a comparison video for you, and today we have the Zero Tolerance 0452 designed by Dmitry Sinkovich and the Zero Tolerance 0804 designed by Todd Rexford, both very popular models for ZT, similar construction, similar size, and I kind of think as I look at these two, they'd appeal to a similar demographic, a similar group of people. Now, there are, of course, some differences that we want to point out, but they're both large folders. They're both, around a 4-inch blade. They both have the carbon fiber scale. So the one thing I will say it is different is the price point. All right, this one is going to come in around $220, not in this particular version, but the standard S35VN is going to be around $220, and this one is going to be around $280. So I know this is, of course, the M390 Sprint Run, but we're going to just pretend that it's the standard version for the purposes of the video. Well, maybe making some notes because price point, for example, the Sprint Run is much more comparable. I think this one goes for $270 or something like that if they're still available at retailers. And this one would be obviously $280. So they're much closer then. We're going to treat it as if there's about a $60 difference that you would get from the MAP price on both of these. So let's start off with size and weight, and that's really where we're going to see a lot of the similarity. This knife, the 804, is 8 3/4 inches with a 3 7/8 inch blade and a 4 7/8 inch handle. It comes in at 5.1 ounces. All right, and in the pocket, it's fairly thin, and it does ride somewhat high. There's a fair bit of handle here that's going to stick out when you have this in your pocket. The Sinkovich, or the 0452, on the other hand, is a bit larger. So we've got a 9 1/4 inch knife here, 4 1/8 inch blade, 5 1/8 inch handle. But the weight on this is only 4.6 ounces, which is very, very good for the size. Okay, so while both of these are extremely light for what they are, the Sinkovich really stands out as extremely lightweight. The other place that it stands out is just how slim it is in pocket. So it carries extremely, extremely well. You don't even know you have it with you. So for our first comparison, size and weight, especially how much weight you have to carry for how much you're going to get, the Sinkovich, the 0452, is going to get the nod as the winner in terms of size and weight. Let's go on now to the blade. By the way, I did want to ask you guys to go ahead and share in the comments below which one of these you would pick, or maybe which one you did pick. You maybe own one or both of these, and I'd love to hear your preferences down below. So let's talk about the blade. Now, one of the big differences, of course, a coated blade versus a satin finish blade, and for my purposes, I kind of like a satin finish a little bit better when I can get it. And I really hope that they release an 804 with a satin finish on the blade. That would be really, really appreciated. So yeah, if anyone from ZT is watching this, a satin finish 804 would be awesome. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the blade shape. Both of these are basically drop point style blades. This one is ZT0804. You have a bit of a swedge here on top, which is a little bit of a pain because of the fact that my thumb doesn't have much space to sort of sit up here. Not the end of the world. It is a very high flat grind. The edge geometry is pretty nice, and you've got quite a bit of belly here to a fine enough tip, but still, and this is pretty typical for ZT. This is a good balance between a very tough blade, very robust blade, and one that cuts really well. And this one does cut very well. Now the Sinkovich is going to be a little finer, slightly finer tip, but still thicker than a lot of, maybe if you compare this to a military or something, Spyderco, this is still a fairly thick tip. The blade steel on this would normally be S35VN, which is not as good as the 204P found on the 804, but still a very good blade steel. It does have this fairly substantial top swedge, but they started the swedge a little forward, giving me a spot for my finger, and I really, really like that. The edge geometry on these is fairly similar. One difference is going to be just in terms of the mechanics of it, because this blade, the blade stock is fairly similar. So because the sink of itch, because the 0452 is shorter, you have a more abrupt angle, although I went ahead and did some comparison cutting where I cut a bunch of different things like side by side, one right after the other, and the difference is really not perceptible. Okay, so it's not really worth talking about, even though I guess technically it would be there. Now, I've got to say, when we compare these two blades, it's a really tough call, but there's a couple of things that are going to make me prefer the blade on the 804. Number one, its design allows it to slice really well while having a lot of toughness, a lot of durability. Number two, the CTS204P is definitely a step up or two from S35VN. And so for those reasons primarily, I'm going to give the win on the blade comparison to the 0804. All right, what about lockup and deployment? Well, both are very nice. Both deploy really quickly. Both are pretty smooth. Both are easy to actuate, to lock and unlock. The 804 is not quite as nice. It's a little sharper there where your thumb has to get in on the lock bar. And as I compare these two, I mean, there's a lot of similarities. They're both titanium frame locks. Let's flip these over so we can see the lock side that we're talking about. They're both titanium frame locks. They both have stainless steel lock bar inserts. They're both on bearings. They're both flippers exclusively. There's a slight difference in the flipper. Notice the 804, I really like this flipper design where it's just short and fat and kind of minimal so that it doesn't make a big, you don't have this big thing sticking out the back of your knife, and I do appreciate that. The flipper on the 0452 is a little more noticeable, but still not that bad. But here's where things become a little bit different. On the 0452, the smoothness on this action is really, really amazing. I don't know what they did differently, if anything, or if it's just kind of a fluke of manufacturing. But the 0452, and I've handled 3 or 4 of them, including this one, they are outstanding, okay? So I really have to give the edge on lockup and deployment, primarily because of the action to the 0452. It is crazy how smooth it feels. It just feels great. In this knife, you're getting the kind of action that you normally are not going to see on a knife for another few $100s in price. So definitely have to give the edge on lockup and deployment to the 0452, primarily again because of the fact that it's just so smooth and the action is just so perfect. Moving on to the handle, we have very similar construction, obviously. Titanium frame lock with carbon fiber, titanium frame lock, carbon fiber. In hand, there are some differences. So the 804 is definitely much more hand-filling. And one of the things that I noticed when I was doing my cutting comparison between these two, preparing for this video, you can get a little more leverage behind your cut because you can really get a hold of this. You can really get your whole hand to bear down on this handle. And because of that, it's just a little better for a really, really tough cutting task. This knife will still do it, but it is quite slim, and this is not a huge issue for me. But if you have really big hands, like an NBA basketball player, a handle this slim, I feel like your hands might wrap around it 3 times. Your fingers, might wrap around it 3 times before, you get a really solid grip. So this one's more hand-filling, but this one is a little more nicely contoured, okay? The texturing, by the way, on both of them is too close to call. But this one is definitely more contoured and more natural fitting in the hand and a little more comfortable. If you squeeze on it, this one's just a little nicer. It seems to be more naturally contoured to fit a human hand than the 804. So it's a real trade-off here. One last point that I want to bring up, and this is primarily about value more so than ergonomics. Both hip pocket clips work very well. Both are very, very functional. I have no issues at all. Some of you might, okay? There may be someone who has a strong preference for a fold-over clip, and there may be some who have a strong preference against it. The same thing is true of the milled pocket clip. Somebody may say, I just, for that price point, I really want that milled titanium clip. And someone else may say, no, I'm not into milled titanium clips. I really like spring clips. So, the clips are definitely very different, but in terms of saying one's better than the other, it's really not something that I can, for my purposes, I really don't see a difference. Now, maybe you do and you feel strongly one way or the other. One other note I would make is if you really want a titanium clip, you could easily do an aftermarket clip on the 0452 and still be cheaper than the 804. All right, so that's how the handles compare, and I don't know which one to give it to in terms of the handle because of exactly what I've told you. So I think I'm going to call that one a tie. Overall, these are both really, really awesome knives. I really like both of them. And if someone, sent me an email or message or something and said, hey, I'm wanting to buy one of these, what do you think of it? I'd say it's an awesome knife. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Okay, and I would say that equally about both of these. For my purposes, now, by the numbers that we've come up with in my little comparison here, it went size and weight and ease of carry goes to the 0452. Blade, because of steel and shape, goes to the 0804. Lockup and deployment, because of just smoothness and how comfortable it is, goes to the 0452. And the handle was sort of a tie. So we really come out pretty neck and neck. We really come out with just 2 points for the 804, 1 point for, 1 point for the 804, 2 points for the 0452, and a tie in that other category. That's pretty tough to say that one is measurably better than the other, okay? So I'm just gonna say both great knives. Based on the numbers, yeah, the 0452 comes out a little bit on top, and probably, if you were only gonna buy one, I would be leaning heavily toward the 0452 because of the price point, okay? I think a lot more people are gonna be able to deal with 220 than 280. And really for a lot of us, it does come down to what we're gonna pay, what we just are able to pay or willing to pay. So there you go, guys, 2 really awesome knives. I hope you enjoyed the comparison. And again, let me know which one you prefer in the comments down below. We'll talk to you soon.